Welcome back to part 2 of our United States Sailboat Show preview. Part 2, we're now going to go through the monohulls that are going to be on display. As you can see from this list, there's a ton of boats that are going to be on display, and we're not going to go visit every single one of them. And in this review, we're not going to go through every single one of them. I've gone through and sort of picked out the boats that are interesting to us. So for example, I'm only going to mention one of the Bennettos and one of the Genos, but we'll probably crawl through most of those. Same thing with the Hansa. But we did pick out some that are particularly interesting to us. So let me give you a little background on what's sparking our interest in boats. So when we transition up from Bell into something that's going to sit on a slip or a mooring, we're talking about going something fairly large. So what we are kind of basing our reference point on is a boat that we found. It's actually a Hunter. It's an older boat. The Hunter 450 and Hunter 456. As best we can tell, there's really no difference between the two boats. They are almost identical in every measurement that we can find apart from sail area. One thing that even on the 450 changes, you can see I'm moving my cursor here to show this arch. On the early 450s, this is a fiberglass arch. By about 2000, they switched over to a stainless arch, which they carried through into the 456 as well. I have read a few anecdotes about this fiberglass arch not being as rigid as some would like, and that's probably why they switched over to the stainless option. Maybe even a cost savings to do that too. Depends. That's a fairly elaborate part that's got to be glued and matched, whereas the stainless one's more of a traditional bimini type, and it's bolted to the side of the hull on the later models in the 456. But the more we look at boats, and we weren't actually looking for a center cockpit, we were kind of open. But the more we looked at boats, we kept on coming back to this one. We still keep coming back to this one. We love the layout and the design of this boat. We're not crazy about a lot of wood on an interior, and we like that there's more white in the fiberglass showing in these. And the master stateroom in these, if you've watched a few YouTube videos of boats for sale and checked them out, this master stateroom in the back is just fantastic. There's a nice desk that's permanent over here with a bench. It's a little tighter on the port side, but it's still partially walk around. You can get up to this diagonal cabinet and still, lay back into this gigantic bed. The master stateroom has its own separate dedicated shower and bathtub from the head. The head is shared with the main cabin. I don't know that they show a good picture of it here in the brochure, but the head is shared as the day head, but that's okay. There's two doorways into it. You can lock one or the other. And the galley is great. It's right at the bottom of the companionway, and it's U-shaped, so you can lean on it and get good bracing. Nice big freezer, fridge, plenty of counter space, and you're close to the companionway. It's not tucked way in behind like some center consoles, center cockpits. And one of the most interesting features is this companionway stairs, and they don't take good pictures of it in either of the brochures. But there's a slight arc to the companionway stairs as it comes down, almost like a spiral. You can sort of see that here in the cockpit or cabin layout. It just looks really neat. They did away with that. Haven't seen it on any other models. I wonder if it's because it is challenging to walk up and down when the boat's heeling, maybe. I mean, it still has the flared steps on the edges to help you with that, but never having stepped on one of these, never mind sail on one, I can only venture guesses. But it still looks pretty cool. So we're still pretty enamored by this boat, and this is kind of setting the standard for what the boats that we look at. It's not gargantuan. It's 45 feet, but it has a ton of room inside, really nicely laid out from an aesthetic standpoint. And the prices of used ones aren't too bad, but they're not too many of them out there. So that's where we're starting from, and that has kind of painted the picture for what we're looking at in boats as we go through. So let's go through in alphabetical order the handful of boats that we are planning to look at based on our likes and dislikes in boats. So the first one is the Bavaria C50. No, this is not a center cockpit. It is a rear cockpit. But if I remember correctly, this does have a fairly decent cabin, but I think the biggest thing is that we liked the aesthetics. Click on this interior, the styling is right up our alley. We like this modern look to it, very European modern styling of the boat, and it comes in different colors. I think I prefer the lighter over the darker, but that's just me. So there's a nice V-berth up front. It's not truly a V-berth. You can walk around this bed for the most part, so that's not so bad. We're not crazy about the true V-berths where you're mingling your feet like we are on Bell. I think that may be the biggest reason why we don't really want a V-berth as the master stateroom, but really like the styling of this vessel. See if we can find a photograph of the rear beds at all. Yeah, kind of here. So typical for a rear cockpit where you get two small, reverse V-hull kind of, reverse V-berth kind of setup where you got to crawl into these beds underneath the cockpit. So not great, but we'd still like to go take a look at it and see what it looks like in person. So next on the list, Benneteau. Bennetto's got a full lineup. They don't have the largest, I believe, in their fleet, but they've got the 511 and below. So I think they have a 57 in the lineup or something like that. Does it show here real quick? Oceanus 55.1, and then the Oceanus Yacht goes up to 62. But the 51.1, I actually have a picture of this on my vision board. I've long been a fan of the Benneteau styling. Always wanted a Benneteau until we started looking more and more at these. I still wouldn't mind one, I don't think. We're definitely going to go crawl around in this ship and see what it looks like. Again, we got a nice modern styling, very similar to the Bavaria, but a bit more rounded, which, especially on corners of cabinets, is a nice thing to have when you're underway. If you're knocked over, even this is pretty sharp. If you were to lose your footing and fall and hit your head on that's a pretty serious wound. So round edges and corners on the interiors is pretty important. So there's a balance there between aesthetics and functionality that has to be weighed. Again, typical, crawl into the bed underneath the cockpit rear, but a decent forward stateroom. The bulkhead for the stateroom has been pulled back far enough so that you can get around these, and you have a nice flap behind the headboard. So I think that one has a separate shower and head as well, so not too bad. Again, it's not exactly perfect, but there's no such thing as a perfect sailboat for everybody. So we'll go check them out. Next in the lineup, we're going to go check these out because I don't know much about them. Hadn't really heard much about them until we started researching lately, is the Hansa line, and they've got a pretty full lineup at the show as well. They've got, where's the H's? There. 348, 418, 458, 548. 675 is getting too big. We'll go probably check it out, but that's bigger than probably what we would ever expect to want to sail around in, but you never know. We'll go check it out. We could have our hearts changed. Jumped one too far. Back to the Hansa. So this is again a rear cockpit layout. So it's not going to have the big stateroom in the back, I don't believe. I think this was let's see if we can find that layout. But I think this is a typical, yeah, here we go. So one of these beds is sort of half walk around, the other one's a crawl in, and I think you can get multiple layouts in this boat as well, but fairly large. It's got some bunks, which would be cool for when you got kids, but there's lots of beds here for a family of 4 like us anyway. with the two of us probably sleeping up here in the front. You could throw one of our kids in each one of these big beds and they'd be swimming in it, at least until they become full teenagers. So there's the Hansa, and next one is the Hylas. So this is the center cockpit. So getting back to where we think we want to go based on the layouts we've seen, having a nice big master stateroom in the back, where the hull is nice and wide. The thing I don't like about the Hylas is it's very woody on the inside, or at least that's the way it seems from the pictures here, and not crazy about the styling. There's like a burl finish on the table here. Even the rails and the stairs are wood. There's a lot wood, but there's some nice big windows on the top. Kind of like a what do they call it? The raised cabin models. Can't remember the name of it. But anyway, nice, great big wide master suite in the back with the full walk around bed, and a decent little V berth up in front. It's still the crawl in type. You kind of get a little bit of walk around at the feet here, but I think they've opted to get you the bunks in a more front to back layout head, in exchange for a little bit of comfort in the V berth. So we're gonna go check that one out. Again, the aesthetics aren't exactly what we're looking for, but it's at the show and it's part of the package to go look at. So we'll go see it. So next, Jeannot. Jeannot's got a full line of boats on display. Go back to the J's here. So from Yacht 54, the 440, the full Sun Odyssey line pretty much, the Yacht 51 and the 640. So they've actually, I think, got more boats on display than Benneteau does, but that could be a time suck trying to crawl through all of those. We're probably not interested in the 35 to 38 foot vessels, especially in a monohull. Maybe if there were catamarans in that size category, we might go look at them, because you get a lot more area for the length on the water for a catamaran, but not with the monohull, where you really kind of need a lot of length to make up the space that you want. So the Sun Odyssey, very similar to the Benneteau, dual helm, rear of the boat's quite wide, as is common now, and that's not as great for blue water sailing, I don't think. You're probably going to get a bit more weather helm with that wide rear end presented to the waves, and it's kind of low on freeboard back there, so we'll see. They've been around a long time. They must know how to make sailboats. Next, one we hadn't heard of before, the Outbound Yachts, Outbound 52 center cockpit. This has a pretty nice rear end here with a big wide step to the back, which is kind of nice, and looks like it has a hard dodger built right into it, kind of like the what is the name of that? I think it's a Norwegian boat. But anyway, we're excited to look at this one. The interior layout looks interesting. We've got bunks on one side, galley on the other, nice big rear master suite, combined head and shower, I think, there, but we'll see. This might be the shower, this X'd out spot. I haven't spent a whole lot of time digging through these photographs. Interior styling looks kind of high on the wood again. Not my cup of tea necessarily, but we're still looking to go and take a look at it and see what it looks like in person. Trying to keep an open mind. We're also not really paying too much attention to prices here. I know some of these that we're going to look at, particularly like the I think the Oyster. There's a $1 million for used yachts. That's just stupid. We're certainly in this size when you can get something like this Hunter for $100 grand, $120 grand, probably a really nice one. Yeah, it's a bit older, but doesn't look it from a styling perspective. You update this with new linens and curtains and electronics. This is still a nice looking vessel as far as I'm concerned. Yeah, back to the Outbound. Yeah, we're interested in taking a look at this one. It's kind of a cutter rig. You can see here from the two foresails, we got a staysail and a Genoa or something out front. Looks like a nice boat, something similar to the Amels, etc. Next one, the Oyster. Like I said, I actually had a hard time finding the Oyster 575, which is what's going to be on display at the show. If you go to the Oyster website, that's no longer an available model, which is kind of interesting. So this one, look at this price for a used sailboat of this size. But there's a cult out there, blue water oyster cult, maybe. Anyway, 2015, 1.3 million for it's probably never going to be in our price range, even if we had the money. But it's there. We're going to go look at it. Next one, another one we hadn't heard of, Passport Yachts. And they have a 545 center cockpit that's going to be on display at the show. This one is another little interesting boat, and we don't know much about it, and keeping an open mind. Take a quick look at one of these photographs here to get an idea of the styling. So this is a bit more like those Hunters. We get the stainless companionway stair rails. It's still a lot of wood in here, but not quite as much. It feels a bit more white and bright than the full wood kind of things we were seeing in some of the others, but not too bad. I don't mind this one so much. So I'm curious to see what this one ends up looking like. And this has, let's see if we get to find the rear stateroom here. Aft stateroom, here we go. So nearly full walk around. I still don't like it quite as much as the Hunter. Like I said, we keep coming back to that Hunter, even though it's 20 years old. It still suits our fancy for style, layout, and so on and so forth. Yeah, I just don't. This one doesn't scream to me. So we'll see. We'll go take a look. Next on the list is Southerly. So this is a really interesting boat. These have been made fairly popular in the YouTube circles by first Distant Shores. They've been sailing, I think they're on their third now, the Distant Shores 3. They've all been Southerly 48s, I believe. And they clearly keep going back to them. So that must be a nice boat. So this is a centerboard. This is Discovery Yachts is the brand. Southerly, Discovery Yachts is the manufacturer. Southerly is the brand. But there's some really nice features here. There's a great rear swim platform there. It is what they refer to as a variable draft system. It's a centerboard, but it's a pretty fancy centerboard and something somewhat unusual from what I've looked into. The whole center bottom of the hull has a carriage or frame for the centerboard, and I believe it's cast iron, and it's part of the ballast system, but it's a foot and designed to ground the boat. So if you want to pull it up on a beach and let the tide go out, it is more than happy to sit on this foot of metal and designed to do such. And the rudders, even though they don't normally touch, and that's the other great thing, there's two rudders on this. Even though the rudders don't normally touch, they are supposedly designed such that it could take the load if they did happen to be sitting on one. A really interesting design. Really interesting layout. It has, despite being a rear cockpit, a rear master stateroom. 2 bunks, which would be great for kids if you had visitors and things like that. Nice big head up and forward, and another separate head for the master in the back. Really interesting layout and boat, and we're really kind of excited to go explore this one in more detail and see what it's like in person. Here's a picture of the rear stateroom. Something else interesting that I've noticed about this is this, sort of a clear story that's in the middle of the master is actually part of the cockpit. So your feet, when you're sitting in the cockpit, go in this lowered section here, and that's the whole cockpit area right here. This is a raised section in the middle of the cockpit where the binnacle, etc., is located. This, I believe, is a double helm, so the helms are actually outboard, so it's not like you got the wheel in back of that, but I believe there's a table and whatnot that goes on there. So I'm curious to see what kind of headroom impediment this cockpit protrusion causes. Let's see if we can find yeah, there's no real good pictures of the cockpit here. That's about as good as it gets. Try and zoom in. Yeah, you can see the dual helms are on each side, and just barely make out this monolith in the middle of the cockpit. So again, very curious to see what this is all about, because kind of like this the more we see it. Like to get in it and get a feel for it and see what's going on. One of the big things that both Southerly and Distant Shores and the other people who currently are making this boat a little bit more popular are the sailing yacht Ruby Rose. Ruby Rose has a smaller version. They have the 38, I believe. But because of the variable draft centerboard setup, they've been able to, just as Distant Shores was able to, sail this boat through the heart of France on the canals, which is a really intriguing thing to do, and something I think I would like to do at some point in the future. Moving on, so we're going to touch real quick on this blue water catamaran. Now this really kind of belonged in the part 1 video because it's a catamaran, but this catamaran is not actually going to be on display at the show. But it's made by Discovery, the people who make the Southerly. It's the same company. This is their Blue Water brand. It's brand new. They, I think, have 3 different catamaran sizes planned, the 50, 53, and 60. The 50 is apparently basically available now-ish, and the 53 and 60 not quite yet. I'm not sure you can even click on these yet. I guess you can. But we're going to ask while we're at the show, learn a little bit more about these, because based on the innovative qualities of the Southerly, I think we can expect some interesting things of the Blue Water. Like to know more about these. So moving on to the more monohulls. So Nautilus Swan will have a Swan 48 on display. Again, another very modern European-styled interior, a bit more rounded than some of the others. Like you see these details on the galley edges; they're much more rounded. Not perfect, but way better than some. I like the nice stainless rails on the companionway stairs. It's got a more traditional, crawl into the bed under the cockpit setup, but a fairly nice V-berth type head cabin up front. So kind of curious to see what this one is all about in person. Looks neat from a aesthetic standpoint from the outside. Let's see if we can look at that. Yeah, so it's got more of a performance rear end to it here, with the deck being flush right off the transom. But it does have a little fold-down swim platform. I can see the seam here in the transom. So perhaps not a great passage-making boat, but it's there. We're going to go take a look at it. Next one. Now this is another interesting one. We've not heard of Wakias. I think that's how you say it. Wakias. South American manufacturer, I believe. Very slick looking exterior, with the deck saloon kind of big windows here. Dual helm, a bit narrower in the rear, I think, than the Swan or the Genoa or the Benneteau. Just by casually looking at these photographs, I'm not sure that that's actually true. Nice big entertaining space here in the cockpit. Pretty looking boat. It's got the forward V-berth type layout with kind of a crawl into arrangement. Not real crazy about that, but it's the guest suite. So despite being a rear cockpit, this boat also has a full master in the back. So I'm really curious to see what the headroom situation looks like. 2 bunks is kind of nice for the kids. And then you could invite guests over if you wanted to. You know, if we were going to park this up in Portland, Maine, and use it as a condo, you know, you could sleep people here in the dinette. You know, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You got eight adults in here fairly easily, and still have some room to stuff a kid on the couch. So this should be an interesting boat as well to go take a look at. Take a look at some of the photographs of the interior for styling. See if we can take a look at this one. So we can see it's a very modern looking, very bright because of these big windows in the salon area. So let's see here if we can find, here's the master. So yeah, we've got this full master in the back, but there's this big monolith sticking down, kind of like in the southerly, but for whatever reason this looks more protruding, like a lot more protruding. It looks like you could walk around the outside of the bed, but to get into the bed you'd feel like you're stepping into like a tanning booth or something, is my suspicion. Or maybe some sort of MRI machine. It's just kind of weird looking. So curious to go see what that one looks like. Second to last, ML is going to have an AML 50 there. This is a pretty famous blue water cruiser. They've been making these a while. I don't think they've changed it very much, other than to give it a styling update. It's a little bit more, you know, austere European styling on these photographs of the current one. But I believe the ML50's been in production for quite a while. Pretty rugged, thick, heavy boat. Center cockpit, so it'll have the big stateroom in the back. See if we can click on the indoor for a layout. Translating for us. I do kind of like the styling of the interior. It's interesting. It's very open, bright. There's a bit of some wood trim going on here, but not too bad. I see the forward stateroom up here. Chart plotting table. And a good picture of what's out in back, or a layout. Don't see a layout button either. Not a great website. Not so easy to navigate. But we're gonna go take a walk around through it in person anyway. So the last one on the list, going to take a look at it because it's new. Yachts, relatively new company. We're looking at their catamarans too while we're there. So we figured we'd take a look at this XC45 since it's about the same size as the Hunter that we're looking at, but it is a rear cockpit, and I don't believe it has a rear stateroom. It has the crawl under cabins there. But nice fold down swim platform for hanging out when you're at anchor. Let's find the interior stuff. Interior looks don't strike me a lot. There's a lot of wood in here. There's horizontal paneling. It's not, at least from these photographs, not my cup of tea. The forward stateroom is partially walk around. Looks like it's feet to the wall. How narrow it is up there. It's really pushed up forward. And no picture here necessarily of the. Oh, here's one. Yeah, so it's crawl under. You know, staterooms in the back, pair of beds in the cockpit area. Yeah, you can see them from here on each side of the companionway stairs. So, doesn't strike me as something particularly desirable, but we're gonna go take a look at it anyway because it's there. So that sort of concludes our lineup of what we think we want to go take a look at. If you guys have anything or any boat in particular you'd like us to stop by and shoot some videos and take notes on, please leave comments. We'd be happy to try and accommodate you if we can. We probably have a pretty busy schedule. We're planning to be there all day Saturday and Sunday, just looking at boats. But you know, if you figure you spend half an hour to an hour per boat, that's really only, I think the show only goes for 6 hours a day, so 12 boats, 2 days, and we've got at least that in catamarans. So we're only going to have 15-20 minutes per boat probably, and still have time to eat lunch. We'll see. Should be fun. We're going to head down in the motorhome, which will be our I think it's our first proper camping outing in the motorhome this year. We didn't really use it much. We took it to a beer fest, but that was it. And then it's going to get put away for the winter, because this is mid-October already up here in New England, and the nights are getting cold, and we don't want things to freeze. So, again, like, comment, subscribe, and we'll give you an update after the show. Bye.